Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world, happy Veterans Day. Veterans Day is a very important time in America. It is a time of reflection. It is a time of learning. It is a time of community. It is a time of mourning. And it is time to bring in one of the most important voices in the history of Veterans Affairs in America and in the world, a man who has inspired me since the day I met him. He's been a mentor, a friend, a true north for me and countless other veterans, and one of the most interesting, one of the most dynamic, and basically one of the coolest mofos I've ever met. The great and powerful Shad Meshad finally joins us on Independent Americans. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here with you, particularly the last couple of days. You've been, you got my back. There's times when you need, the world can slap you in the face, and particularly with the loss of someone that is so close and special to you, as we will talk about I'm sure in this interview. But I'm a little sad, but I'm elated to be with you, Paul, because you're been such a part of the nation's veterans coming home. I mean, my whole life has been that, and you came in at the right time, and I'm just elated and honored to be here today.
Well, if there's good that can come of Max's passing, it's that it's bringing us together, and it's bringing a lot of folks together. We're all reflecting and mourning and celebrating, and we're talking, which is a big part of what I will always remember about Max. Our phone calls, him calling me calling him. We traveled together, we went to stuff together, but just talking, and him encouraging me to talk. And I remember he said to me once, when I was thinking about writing a book, I think he said something like, "You have to write a book because your story is not your story." He said it's everybody's story. He said you have to tell that story for all the people who can't. And he told his story for all the people that couldn't. He generated such rich conversation and dialogue and policy change. And you guys together transformed the way people talk about everything, but especially about pain and veterans groups. So I'm glad we're talking, right? Like, we need to talk. We need to talk about this. We need to tell Max's story. We need to celebrate him, especially for the folks that maybe never heard about him, younger folks especially. We gotta teach the history of our movement and of this country. And I'm gonna have a beer. I talked to my friend Tom Keefe yesterday. He was a Vietnam vet who knew Max well. I asked him how he's doing, and he was hurting, and he's a listener of this show, so shout out to Tom and so many other vets that worked with Max and around Max. And he said he was in his garage having a beer, listening to tunes, thinking about Max. And so, Max was a guy who loved life and brought joy to people. So I'm having a beer. I'm going to pour a little out for Max, and I'm going to get to talk to one of the greatest Americans I've ever met. So I want to ask you, Shad, we've been through a lot of shit together. We had a lot of conversations over the years, but I want to ask you the same question I ask all of our guests. Where are you, and how are you?
Well, I'm in Los Angeles, where I came after Vietnam. I've been out as my permanent residence here in Los Angeles for over 50 years, but I've been all over the world in my work. But obviously with what's been going on, and with the loss of Max, I got to tell him goodbye the night before he passed on FaceTime with Linda Bean, who's been by his side for the last few years and became a good friend of mine. He couldn't talk. He was barely breathing, but I got to shout and throw a kiss to him. And so I'm hanging in there. I probably wouldn't talked about it. I've got a million calls from colleagues around the country that knew our relationship, but didn't really want to talk over and over again about it. But because how special you are to me and Max, I'm elated to be able to speak about our history today, even though it's just been seems like a few hours since he moved on. So I'm ready. I'm ready.
I'm thankful and honored to have you here finally on this show. I can't believe I haven't had you on before, but I hope it'll be the first of many visits. I've learned so much from you and from Max, and a big part of what, frankly, why I don't leave the veteran space is because I feel like a baton is being passed, and I have to pass the baton to the next crew, because you all have taught me so much. You told me so many stories. You helped me understand things I didn't know. And you've told this kind of founding history of the modern veterans movement and these critical chapters of American history, so much bigger than just veterans, right? Max was so much bigger than a veteran. Your work is so much bigger than just veterans. But let me ask you to tell the story of when did this man, Shad Meshad, first meet this man, Max Cleland?
Well, I say in a lot of my conversations, my life has been a God shot, and that was definitely one of the biggest God shots in my career, was meeting Max. Max had been at Walter Reed. I landed in LA in 71 and eventually assessed the largest psychiatric facility in the country because they asked me to, because of my job in Vietnam as a mental health officer, and the fact that Vietnam vets were struggling so bad, even as the war was going on, coming back. And the hospital hired me for a 90-day assessment of the largest VA psychiatric facility in the country, and I gave them 90 days, and I failed them, and I told them why, and they said, well, you know, Dr. Philip May, who was the head of MPI at UCLA, was also over the VA. They were waiting to hire people to take over, and he said, I need you to fix it. So, you know, I don't know who else could fix it. Well, there weren't many of us mental health officers in Vietnam. We were very rare birds. You know, I was a therapist for 150,000 men scattered over 1 and 2 Corps. It was a joke, but that's what it was. That was the beginning of mental health in the combat zone. So they thought I had all the answers. I did not have the answers. All I knew is there weren't Vietnam vets in this hospital. And if our county had 335,000 Vietnam era veterans, that's twice the population of the city I was raised in. It's like, wow. But when you got 16 to 18 million people, ones that are real citizens, and, you know, that's a lot of folks, and no public transportation except for buses and freeways. I hit the streets. I said, I've got to find out. And luckily I ran into a couple of vets down at Venice Beach that were getting ready to do a story on the VA and about how it sucks. And I went down there, and I'm in my afro and beard. I'm in a government car. I walk Venice Beach, and I find them. And these two guys really were a big part of my career, because once they trusted me, and I was able to take them back to the VA, because they got kicked off the ward by a German female psychiatrist that they called Nazi, and another German psychiatrist in admissions that was kind of Nazi-like, and it was really nothing other than if they had a patch on them or a tattoo, they couldn't even come in. They kick them out of admissions. So I learned a lot, but these guys connected me. They took me to 2 places where my career started. One was a condemned pier, what do you call it, an entertainment pier, and it was called the Pacific Ocean Park Pier. It's condemned in '68, and they take me through a trap door, and there's 250 Vietnam vets that took over the pier, hidden trap, because it was condemned. And that's where I got all my leads. And then from there, a couple of guys, as long as I did something, I would take them to the hospital. I'd bypass all of the bureaucracy, because the director said, whatever you got to do, just don't go to jail. I kind of looked like a jailbird. So I learned about this group of Marines that lived up in Coral Canyon, a canyon up past Malibu, that had set up a fire base. And that story Dan Rather did back in '88. I had to give 10 years to the guys that inhabited that fire base silence, or they would execute me. And I was escorted in by rifle for years. So
for real.
I'm pretty established. I'm out in East LA, South Central, in the mountains, up in Cathedral Point. Venice Beach was, it was just packed. Vets were coming from New York, Boston. You had every accent down there. We had, thousands and thousands. Once I located where they went, I was embedded. And then I get a call from Alan Cranston's office. He was the chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee And he had been pushing for some kind of psychological readjustment for Vietnam vets, starting in like 71, 72. And at the same time, Max Cleland was in Walter Reed trying to figure out how he could live with a body with no legs and no arm, just one arm, and was rehabbing or whatever. And Cranston gave him his first job. I mean, he was from Vietnam to Walter Reed, and now he's on this veteran, they're like aides that take on veteran problems when they come to the Veterans Affairs Committee, and he gave him his first job. So he said, look, I had gained a nickname in 4 years on the streets out here as the Madman, probably because I looked, and the fact that I was always out on the streets running groups in different sections of the city. I don't think most of the hospital therapists, psychiatrists, other than a few, really liked me because, I wasn't doing psychiatry in the office and helping these guys. I went to them, and I rode a Harley Davidson. I didn't, to get around in this city, I sort of fit the illusion that I was some kind of nut job, but I got the nickname Madman. And Cranston said, we're getting close. We're trying to do this bill, which we'll get to. And I'd like for you to go out and see what this guy, Madman or whatever he is out there, is doing. And that was Max's first assignment. And he comes rolling in 74, late 74. He's got a guy, I call him a pusher, that pushes his wheelchair. They come into a van, and he's all dressed up in a suit. And he looks at me like, so where are he thought I was one of the clients. And I said, no, I'm Shad. I'm the Madman. And we went in for a briefing, and I said, Max said, so where are they? And I said, well, they're not here. We're going to get in another van, and I'm going to take you on a ride. And I took him to Venice Beach. He was so nervous. I mean, we're like Cherry at that time. Now I'm going to go out and see veterans that aren't in hospitals, but on the streets. And I rolled him down the tramway along the beach. If you've ever been to Venice Beach, it's like the greatest free show on earth. Mm-hmm. But we had thousands of Vietnam vets and pockets all over there, and I had already discovered them, had been working in groups in different parts. And I pushed him down there, and as I introduced him to vets and I explained who he was, and they saw his injuries, it just merged. And we were down there most of the day. The director's waiting for us to come back. I come back up there. Max was in tears. I was like, what's wrong? I mean, this is it. He just couldn't believe, because he thought in his world it was all physical injuries. Walter Reed, there's everything and anything. And now he's seeing these invisible wounds, and just thousands of these guys, Black, white, Hispanic, Native American, Asian. I had them all. And he says, what do you do? I say, well, we get into rap groups. And I would have taken him to one, but he was just getting out. And he went back and gave a report. We became friends because he knew that something had to be done on the streets. It wasn't a thing where we give them this or give them money. These guys were angry or whatever, but they were really empathic towards what happened to him. And, well, as you know, a peanut farmer that was a friend of Max becomes president, Jimmy Carter, 76 election, and Cranston is still pushing this thing. And Max gets in and says, I got the guy that he needs to talk. We need to talk about what he's doing there. It's probably going on all around the country. So they brought me in, and I remember I had to trim my hair and beard. My best buddy who was at Nam with me, he was a real restaurateur, gave me one of his suits or whatever. I just felt uncomfortable. And I go in, they take me up to his office, and there are all these cameras, in 60 Minutes is filming, and I'm looking, and I'm like, hey, Max, what's going on? Shh, we're filming. I mean, and it was just, I was, as soon as they quit filming, I jumped in, I'm hugging him. He's like, hey, and he starts introducing me to all of these cowboys that he hired at the VA, from Dean Phillips, Tim Craig. I could go on and on. Some of them are not even alive today, but they were all Vietnam vets. And he said we got to get Congress behind. We got Republicans that think we're crybabies, and or your first thing is because I went there every 3 months to meet with all the heads there from 77, 78, and the first part of 79, and I got into a lobbying role of meeting different senators and congressmen that were many of them at that time were World War II vets, and they thought Vietnam vets only served a year, were crybabies. You know, we did 3 years. I fought at the Battle of the Bulge. I was in the Pacific. They kept looking, you know, they considered us crybabies, and I took them head on. I said, it's not the quantity of time, it's the quality and what happens during that. And, you know, I've been working with Dr. Charles Figley, Dr. Robert Lifton at Yale, and Chaim Shatton out of New York, doctors, all doctors, about this thing they kept calling post-Vietnam syndrome. What does that mean? It's not a diagnosis. You can't get $1 for it in the VA. You're either psychotic or character disorder to get benefits for any kind of war emotional injury. Well, are you psychotic, Paul? I mean, you were there. It was just, there was no way. And so a lot of Vietnam vets faked being crazy just to get some money to survive, because they had, you know, they were mostly high school graduates, had no training for a job, flipping hamburgers and stuff like that. And their attitudes and their trauma that they had was not identified. And so at that time, I'm working on what today is known as PTSD with the 5 or 6 well-known, not all well-known. I wasn't well-known. Figley wasn't well-known, but we were all together saying, this is not a diagnosis. So I pleaded that with Max, and Max said, well, right now I need to get a thing. What is this psychological center going to be? I said, well, don't call it that. Let's call it a vet center, a center where veterans can go and huddle, do the rap groups that I started. We need to develop more training. I had a few films that I was in. A documentary in 72 and 3 shows me in LA, like I looked, and all over the city. And I said, we really need to get that in place and what's made of it. And you can't call it something that they won't go to. And they may not go to vet centers. Vietnam vets have been 10 years, the war, you know, they'd been out for 10 years. Think about it. You go there 18, you're 28 or 30, and all of a sudden we're going, help without hassles. Come to the vet center. They knew that somehow they're connected with the VA. They knew that I had been a VA, counselor. And so I figured there might be a real freeze, resistance to go. But I said, you got to make sure, call it a vet center. We do rap groups. We don't do psychotherapy groups. And I just laid it out, and I lobbied that for 2 years. And eventually one of the senior congressmen, Olin Teague, Tiger Teague, Medal of Honor winner from World War II. He always, you come in his suit, he was 5x5. He had that Medal of Honor in your face. So what do you want? You crybabies, whatever. And I took him on just like I'd take anybody. I didn't give a hell. You know, I'm a Vietnam vet. I'm probably messed up too, but I'm angry how we've been treated, spit on, this or that. I said, look, tell me about your 5 years and what you got the medal. Well, I got it in the second year, whatever. And we'd go back and forth. It's funny though. He retired in January of 79, and we finally had the votes to get Cranston's bill in Public Law 9622. We had to wait till he retired. 2 years later, I'm a nominee for the Olin Teague Award for service. And I went to the service, and the wife came up, and she said, he loved you. He said, you're one of the fighting Vietnam vets, and he was a fighter. I said, I was just fighting his attitude. But it's funny. So back to Max, we finally get the Public Law 96 passed in June of 79, comes law. That summer, I was bringing in everybody I knew. I brought in all the doctors we were still working on the PTSD thing for the APA, and Max would sit in there, and I was always pulling on his one arm. And that was just a crazy summer. We had to have our first training in September. but Max was coming to LA and we were both single. And Max tell me to stop, Paul, but we partied. I took him out. We got close like you and I got close. You know, sometimes I forget that you're that much younger than me, but Max, I didn't realize he was a party animal. And, you know, I'm in LA. My best buddy is working on Sunset with a great restaurant. Max had been seen on 60 Minutes, and so people would come up, you know, and he loved it. And he had friends everywhere, and we would party. And some of the great moments, he would fly in. We'd put him up in the Marina City Club where he could hide out, and he always had escorts of beautiful women. They were always 6 feet or taller. They were towering over me. I'd have to get him ready. We'd go out to these parties or whatever. He'd be dancing with that one arm, and I'd be flipping him. And we just got crazy. Then my friend Bob Franco and I, we were athletes, little short athletes, but Bob was great at basketball at the Marina City Club. We took him in. They had basketball court on top. You know, this only mega millionaires lived in this high rise that was built by these billionaires, and he beat us in horse with his left. He could just pop all net all the time in his wheelchair. Franco was playing, you know, semi-pro ball. I could hit a jump. He just sit in that chair, boom, 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 just smoked us. And then we get crazy, and you know, I had to be careful because he was battling, you know, alcohol abuse. I wouldn't say abuse. He just, you know, all the pain and stuff. It definitely kills pain. Yeah. And it went on and on. We'd go to.
Can I pause you there for a second, Shad? And this is why I wanted you on the show, because I've heard some of these stories and pieces of these stories, but America needs to hear these stories that, you know, are through Max's eyes and your eyes. But, you know, there's so much in this, and there's a couple points I want to pull out. Like, one, I didn't know until I hung out with you guys and Wayne Smith and so many others how much friction and resistance and animosity you got from the World War II guys, many of them, right? And who also said you were the first generation to lose a war. Right, that was another part of this too, and hearing from all the folks about how hard people assume now the wall was a thing. You all had to fight like hell for every inch, whether it was the vet centers or the VA or the wall or just basic recognition. So, you know, there's a tragedy in this story too, right? In Max's journey and his fight constantly for all of these things. But let me ask you to bring us back to the point where I did Chuck Todd's podcast today, and he said, you know, Max Cleland was I think the first cabinet secretary. I don't even think it was a cabinet level at that point, but can you tell us, what was it like when Max was named? You know, triple amputee, Jimmy Carter names him, Vietnam vets are, you know, still getting so much friction and being spit on. What was it like for everyone when Max was named to this post?
To be honest with you, other than D.C., Georgia, nobody knew who Max was until, I mean, he went to stardom as soon as he was appointed. Jimmy Carter, this peanut farmer, wins this, and next thing you know, he appoints this triple amputee that I happened to meet under Cranston, his first job. And it was mind-boggling. When I heard that, it's like, wow, because I had been working with Vietnam Vets Against the War in Venice, headed up by Ron Kovic, who was anti-this, anti-that, slashing. They had taken over the VA director's office.
Ron Kovic, who most folks will know from Born on the
4th of July. He was in my first rap groups in the city. He was in my first documentary I was in. You should see it. I mean, he was an angry dude. And not that I wasn't angry, but I wasn't out of control. He just whatever. And then Max comes in. He's in a chair, not paralyzed, but no legs, no arm. And then it was like, wow, I'm so glad I met him before all this big stuff. He was just this aide for Cranston. And then we just like I get with you, I don't care who's around or whatever. We're going to talk about the kids or whatever. That's how it was with Max. Everybody's looking at me like, wow, And I'm, the same contrast as we had when I took it to Venice Beach. I looked a lot more normal, but that had already happened. And so now I was under the pressure for the director of mental health and the director of all the doctors in the VA in the country. They're all looking at me, looking at Max and looking at me. I'm like, oh God. And our contrast, but we were both huggers and we're both Southern boys. And so they didn't know what was going to happen. And I just came in and said, we got to have this, and this. And I got in there. My colleague, I brought Bill Mahidi, Reverend Bill Mahidi, who was a chaplain in Vietnam, to help diagram. I have the diagram, copies of the original diagram that they sent to Congress or whatever that we etched and drew out. And it was a daily thing, Paul. It was a daily battle. But the thing about Max is when he would get to LA, because just being on the spot and being there with the VA, because they resisted everything he did. And there's other stories, but he would get away, and it was LA. And as soon as he got there, he was mine. And then he goes, so what do you need? Do I need to talk to the director? I said, I'll get to that. Let's have some fun tonight. Mm-hmm. And it goes on all through our life.
That's an important part of Max that I want for, he's so celebrated for his political career, but his warmth, his humility, his jokes, like he was just a warm guy, always telling jokes, always cry, always laughing, always talking about what's important, always telling you he loved you, right? That was something that a lot of guys never heard from another guy, right?
We
you never
both are like that.
An older guy loved you and he cared about you, and that really mattered, that he actually cared about you as a person. And I think he knew about his symbolic value, right? He knew about the wheelchair and the amputee and how politicians and others would propify that. But you guys also kind of brought vet stuff mainstream, artfully. Like you talked about Ron Kovic, and there's all these journeys along the way outside your office. I don't know if you still have the drum set from the Doobie Brothers, because they were so key. But can you take us through the other part of this, which was, the cultural part? You were doing the medical side and the political side, but you were also mixing music and celebrity and culture, a generation ago, before that was a thing like it is now. So take us inside that world. I don't know if you got a story or two you want to tell us, but that was a wild world you guys were in too.
I don't know how far to go, man. I don't know who's going to be watching.
I'm not going to.
Because I was looking at all the articles on Max immediately, and they mentioned maybe that just a line, the vet center pro. They don't know anything about Max, in my opinion, because I knew him from the time he left Walter Reed to Cranston to director and all these other things, to governor. I mean, I did two Senate hearings for him about why the military needs to do. I was really big into transitioning them with all these generals that he would have in or whatever, and try to sell them on, help deprogram these guys. 6 months. I was pushing for 6 months. Maybe it was too much for them to deprogram guys that are going back into civilian life so they wouldn't face all these different things. And this was before the 9/11 and everything. This was in the mid 90s. But I had already been through that with Vietnam and the Gulf War. I just saw stuff. There's just so much ignorance. And I would let him know what it was, but we'd always say, hey, we love each other. When are we going to get together? And when we get together, let's get out of here. Let's go for a ride. Get a convertible. We'll go up here, whatever. That's what friends do. Very few times you can work for somebody as big as Max, as far as his job and everything, and sort of be one of his pieces, and then go party like we were twin brothers. And that's how it felt. I mean, he looked totally different to me. I got my limbs or whatever, and we went out, and it just disappeared. It's like, let's go boogie. You got me a beautiful woman, got you a beautiful woman. Let's get out there. He liked the boogie. And the greatest story with my dear friend Bob Franco, who served with me in Vietnam, he's infantry, who he was with me through all my journey here in LA. And Max, of course, became our friend. And we introduced him to everybody like Springsteen and Deborah Harry, all the celebrities ate at his restaurant. And Max would come in and the big table, everybody's at his table. Max just loved being in the center, it was great. And they'd see me jump him and hug him and mug him. And they're like, man, this guy's human. He's just not this mannequin on a pedestal. Mm-hmm. And so when I was setting up the foundation after I left, because he had only was in 4 years because Carter lost, but when I was setting up the foundation or whatever, when he would come for some type of thing, we hook up, we'd continue to do our thing. But I went to Atlanta with Bob. We went there. My sister had her 50th birthday or something years ago, and we invited Max, and then we took Max out to one of the hot clubs in Atlanta. He had already been Secretary of State, he'd been VA director. I mean, everybody in Atlanta knew Max. This is our favorite story. I had him laughing up until 2 weeks when he could respond. But we go to this big nightclub. Everybody's working. Everybody sees Max. He was running for something in Georgia, governor or something. And we're out there on the floor. He's sweating. And the girls start ripping his shirt off. He's sweating. He's ripping. And the band is playing Sherry Baby. The guy, the New York group that sang Sherry Baby, and I'm blank right now.
I know the song. I know.
We get him up on stage. Right now, get him up on stage, and the singers, the girls all over him, and he's singing Sherry Baby with the band. It's one of the greatest moments.
With no shirt on.
It's ripped off.
No shirt.
It's ripped off. And I got pictures, but it's a don't ever show those. But I look at him, and he's just like this, and the women, and they're just mauling him, and we're like bodyguards.
Amazing.
You can take my shirt, It was one of the great nights. We had nights like that. I could tell.
He was a guy who appreciated life, and everyone around you appreciated life more when you were with him, when you could see him, shooting a jump shot or singing a song or just enjoying himself. I mean, he knew that when you looked at him, he said, shit, my life isn't that hard. If this guy can do it, I told my son about him yesterday, and he had heard about Max before, and he talked to him on the phone, and I said, look, he did these things and he only has one arm. And he said, but Dad, can he climb a mountain? I said, he can do anything. He is a Superman. And that's, the perspective that he brought to everyone was so far ahead of its time in some ways. So can I ask you, Shad, I mean, politics is a part of this. Everything is political around this. What was it like later when he was a senator and, he seemed to be, he was a man of integrity. He cared about issues. And this time when John Kerry is in the limelight and Max was attacked, John Kerry was attacked and their service was attacked, right? Like, did Max, somebody said Max wasn't a veteran because he lost his legs in a grenade accident, right? It wasn't an enemy grenade. And for a long time, he thought it was his own grenade, turned out to be another guy's grenade, right? There was this kind of twistedness around the way he had to experience that out in public. And I think he said when he lost the Senate race, it was more painful for him than when the grenade went off. And he went into a deep depression. Can you talk about what you think we need to know about that, having Max out there? And it was about Max, but it was also about all of you as Vietnam vets under attack.
I went bananas. I went out. When that happened, he could hardly breathe. And of course, my sister, I got family back there, and I went there and I spent time, and we both wept. I mean, we didn't even go out. We usually go out to a restaurant or something like that, and everybody's coming. He isolated, and I knew that, and I was so angry. But it wasn't. It was me through him. Be like somebody smacking your kid, and you just get furious, and I just had to be with him because I put myself, and I do that with everybody that I encounter or work with, put myself in their shoes. And we spent 2 or 3 days. I should have stayed longer. We talk about that, but he was mortally wounded. He couldn't believe that people that hadn't been there were calling him a loser and a fake and all the stuff they did with John McCain later. I think one of the presidents recently called us losers. I mean, but to lose that race and how cruel everybody was. I mean, it's okay to have different political differences, but it affected me like it would affect someone, as I said, messing with your wife or your kid. And I guess I was just there. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say the last few years over a lot of stuff. But the divide must have been happening. People were just becoming vicious. And all I know is we never missed a week without talking from that time, me checking. Eventually, he went and got help. He actually went to a vet center. I recommended. I said, whether we start, I'd go to one if I had to. You need to go somewhere where people can hear, and luckily, he did that. And I said, hey, that's being manly. We've talked about it. Most war fighters aren't going to say, hey, I'm hurting. I don't, for a number of reasons. But I said, Max, you've done everything. The world is so much better, particularly in America. And there's always going to be somebody that's going to hate you, because I went through it. Mm-hmm. That's why I left the vet center. They were trying to change it and bring it back into the VA. Mm-hmm. And I birthed that thing along with Max and Carter. And it was like, but I'm still in it. You can't do this. And they really had the power. When I thought whatever, it wasn't going to happen. Max and I both wrote to the VA. Nobody's listened. They weren't listening. Everything is convenient. It's easier for us to manage in one place. They were centralizing it again rather than decentralizing these services. And it was a battle, but that brought me closer to him. And I think there was a time that it happened to you, and somebody had badmouthed or said something because, hey, you're an important American veteran doing something important. Somebody didn't like it. They probably didn't like my beard at one time or my accent or whatever. They'll come at you with anything, but he got through it. He got through it. I don't think I got through it. I still, when I think about that or whatever, I never bring it up to Max unless he did. But all I did the last 6 months is sing Sherry Baby and talk about one of the funniest times in our lives, getting him ready for a party. We just could do and say anything. How many buddies do you have like that, veteran or not?
There's so much heart in all of his story and your story and the story you guys together. I hope somebody makes a movie about the two of you and about each of you. I got a whole idea about how
it would be a comedy.
it would be an amazing insight into that time, because you guys are these formative figures that shaped so many parts of what we experience today. And Max, when Max got attacked in that Senate race, that was the first time we saw this tone that became so commonplace for Trump, where nothing was off limits, where you could call a triple amputee who gave his whole heart and soul for this country a loser. You could question his patriotism. They said he was sympathetic to the terrorists. They hit him low and hard and repeatedly, and it was actually like, this is another example, in my view, of how Max took it for us, right? Like, he, in many ways, he took that grenade for everybody, and he took, time after time, he took grenades for everybody, and he was the first one through that breach, and it cost him his political career, and it damaged him politically. And I remember being in a room with John Kerry where he said to a bunch of vets, what do you guys think about VP? And Max was in the room, and we all said Max should be the VP. Max should be your candidate. Max, and I wasn't even a Democrat, but I knew that Max had a magic. But there was also, I think Max sometimes got tokenized. It's like, oh, it's just Max. He's just the vet. But he was so much more than that. And those of us that knew him knew that. And I hope that people know that now. Like, his political career was just a piece of it. But his transformation of our society with you and others, and as a leader who opened that breach so that, he was uptown, you were downtown, right? And you guys were kind of like the weirdest band, and there's this extended band. Like, I don't know how many members of the Doobie Brothers there are, but it seemed like they were always changing, new ones were coming in. That was all.
Oh, yeah.
Wayne Smith, Ron Kovic, Bobby Muller. I could go on and
That's
on.
a great analogy.
Jan Scruggs, all of you. There's just this amazing tapestry of dudes and women, I'm sure, too, who are part of it. But it's a really important part of our history that I don't want to be lost. And let me ask you a specific question, Shad. Max is gone, and we're going to celebrate his life. We're going to mourn his passing and celebrate his life. That's what my friend Bonnie Carroll has taught me, and I try to harness that. If Max could talk about Max, what do you think he would say, right? Because, in the real talk, like right now, if he said, hey, guys, I'm gone now, message from beyond, right? What do you think he would say to all of us?
I know exactly what he would say. He wanted to grow up and be a cowboy, and I'm not joking. The last year, 2 years in bed, he's been watching he's got autographed things from cowboy celebrities. He really wanted to be out riding a horse, hustling cattle or whatever. And I'm telling you, if you want me to be totally honest,
yeah.
He says, what do you want to be? And I said, well, maybe I'll own the ranch that you hustle. I don't know if I want to spend my career. There were similarities in us and some that were very dissimilar. But he would just say, man, wouldn't it be simple? We could just ride the plains and just enjoy life and see the beauty, and look what we got stuck into. Everybody's watching us, everybody's critiquing us, because he knows what I went through after he left. Everybody came after me. I wasn't the VA golden boy anymore, and they tried to keep pulling the VA. The VA kept pulling the vet centers in and centralizing everything. And I'd call him, but he had no power. But he would back me. But it was like, why can't we just get on the horse and ride into the sunset? And that's really one. And he lived that in bed for the last 3 years, watching those and dreaming. I sat and watched them back in April, and that's what he wanted to do. That's it. Bottom line. Maybe the secret's out, but that's what
I think that's
we all wanted a simple thing. We wanted to just be a simple American, that image of just riding. And he loved cowboys. I did too, but I got into sports and stuff. He couldn't. And I just got back from the Smoky Mountains after all the stuff that's went on since August with the fall of Afghanistan. Everybody asking me for answers. God, if I just come down to it, it's all political. It has nothing to do. But I had to get away in the beauty and everything. And I would talk to Max even when I could get a signal to say, hey, brother. And I would turn my phone just like I do you do with the kids. And I'd say, hey, look at this. And he would mumble and go, I should be there. I should be there. He could hardly talk. And just share everything. But
that's so important for people to understand, because if you knew Max, you knew there was this little boy, like wide-eyed, childlike quality about him, and it's part of what everybody loved. He was a dreamer.
He was.
Right? And there's something, in those, to hear that he wanted to be a cowboy, the idea of being free and not being in that chair. And, I was talking
with his arms and his legs.
Yeah, I remember Max is a sweetheart. He also had a fiery temper, man. I was traveling with him one time, and I was staffing him. And he had the two wheelchairs. He had the wheelchair he rode in, and then he had the wheelchair he put like his briefcase and all the shit in, right? And they were both kind of rickety. He never wanted a mechanical wheelchair. He didn't want any prosthetics. He was doing it his fucking way always, right?
Always.
And we were going from D.C. to New York. And I realized when we got to New York, I had so many things to keep track of because there was all this shit around Max, and I wasn't his real staffer. And I forgot his blazer in the top of, look at your face. I forgot his blazer in the top of the Amtrak. And he was so fucking pissed at me. I thought he was going to kill me. And I figured he was going to be cool about it. Oh, don't worry about it. But what I realized, he was really mad. He was very mad. But when I unpacked it, what I understood and I understand now is we went to the same hotel, and when he got there, they knew him, and he went into the same room, and I helped him put on his breathing thing that he had to breathe through when he slept, and I realized he had everything wrapped so tight because it's the only way he could do all those things that he did. To be on the road all the time with no legs and no kids. You know, he did so much of it alone. He had some great staff that I still stay in contact with and I love. But to be able to function at that high level with those limitations, it's a side folks never saw. How much pain he was in constantly, how hard it was for him to move around physically, the demands on him, how his body temperature, you know, would be out of whack. It was so fucking hard for him, and he did it for so long. And that's what I want people to know and understand, that he never showed. He always smiled and he always had love for everybody else. But I know when he went home, he was exhausted and he was in so much pain. And then he'd get up and do it again. And he'd get up and do it again. And he'd get up and do it again. And he almost always did it for someone else. And that's where, you know, I don't think the Democrats, it's another reason I'm pissed at the Democrats forever. They never appreciated Max Cleland. I don't think John Kerry fully appreciated Max Cleland. That man went everywhere for everybody. If he heard a vet was running, he'd be out there for you. And that's a spirit that I just want folks to understand and know about, because it was deep in his heart, and it's a part of what made him so special.
Boy, you put it all. You put Max right into perspective. I mean, I all of that I've experienced for 47 years, and to be able to go back and enjoy that even when he's dying. I mean, just sit there. I would break out and go, "Hey, let's do the first line of Cherry Baby," and he'd be there, you know, trying to talk to Cherry Baby, and he had one of the caretakers call me. And he said, "Just say Cherry Baby called." And I had this voice. This is, I'm one of the caretakers. Is this Cherry Baby? That was like 2 weeks ago. And
he was a joker. Yeah.
Things that are just private and wonderful. There was a big night. He was being honored. I guess this is back in like 81. Was it 81? Yeah. No. What am I saying? 81. This was like 78, 79. He was being honored in the Marina Del Rey at the Marina City Club or whatever. And his assistant got sick or something, got caught. And so he said, "Look, you're going to have to come and get me dressed and help me for the thing." So I got in because we were going to go to this big party and he was going to be honored. And I don't know how far to go, but he had to shower, and how he showered, speaking of what you're saying, when you go into these hotels back then, they have these little things you open up, you put your luggage on. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden he says, "All right, get the luggage rack, get it set in the shower." So I got it set in the shower, and then I had to kind of help him drag, because he'd pull with that one arm and get him up and on the luggage rack, and then turn the shower. He would reach the shower if he could and adjust the water, and he'd be bathing. He was all lathered up, and he didn't get all the soap off of it. I swear to this day, it's one of my favorite stories. And I turned the water off, and he slips off and falls onto the floor, tile floor. The luggage rack flies in the air, and I'm trying to grab him, and it was like a greased ball. It was so slippery. I kept slipping and dropping him, slipping and dropping him. Then I had to rinse him off. It was like a cement bag, getting him up on the bed, and then he said, "All right, get the towel, get this or that." Then I had to dress him. I wish I could do that one more time. And he got up, and the next thing we walk, it was like an hour. We were late for the thing. Walking, he has his 6'2" girlfriend that comes and just can't wait to be with Max. And I roll him in, and there's this big party room and dinner and everything. And he just comes in like everything was just like everything was normal. And I was just laughing all night. And he'd look at me and go, "Don't tell that story."
But he had,
oh my God, I miss him so much. This has been very good to be able to talk with you about him, because I couldn't take any other interview without somebody knowing him. It would just, thank you.
I'm so grateful for this gift, and I want to find ways to continue to tell these stories, because these are the stories that people need to hear, and they need to know, and they need to, for me, leadership's about sacrifice, and he sacrificed so much for so many, and so have you. And I want to have you back on to go deeper into your amazing and inspiring story if I don't make a movie about it before then. But I want to ask you, let me ask you maybe a final question if I can, Shad, about Max. What is Max's place in history? What is Max for America? How do you summarize his place in history and what his legacy is?
He came at the right, he was pivotal to take what myself and other veterans were trying to do outside of the VA. He came at a time where he couldn't have been a better role model, being an intelligent, one of the greatest speakers, severely disabled, to come in and be able to handle it at that level and bring people like myself in, smart enough to know, hey, we need this, we need this. He had a way of, you couldn't say no to Max. You just couldn't say. You loved him, and he would say whatever. He had a way. He had a delivery that it took. He had all the tickets. The vet centers would have never happened. It would have never happened. Cranston didn't know what to do. He'd been piddling with, what are we going to have, a psychiatric center for whatever, like vets were crazy or whatever. None of that worked. When Max came out with me and to really show him, he got the chance to see in process, because he had never been on the streets. He hadn't been out of rehab for years. Yep. Just us hooking up. What I created would have never been created. I don't know what I would have done after that because of the assignment to take this nationwide. And then all the people, a lot of them that work with him. There's something about someone that's at a disadvantage becomes a superstar. He just did it, without legs and an arm. And that empowered him so much. I mean, whatever you believe in, or higher power, whatever, Max was put in that. And to live to 79, I mean, I just can't imagine. I never feel like, I gave my all with 2 legs, 2 arms, and I'm mobile, I can do things or whatever. He was so dependent and yet independent, and just his charisma. I mean, and it will always be for veterans. I mean, just the fact that the vet centers have made it over 40 years, hopefully beyond that, new treatment techniques that are out there. There's other stuff coming. But he paved the way for all that to happen in a big way. I remember just feeling like I was in this little city of LA doing my thing, and I had enough for a lifetime, 335,000, whatever. I would have probably died with him or whatever, but he was able to expand it. I mean, you don't realize it, but the vet center expanded into Australia for all the Australia. Right. They mimicked the vet centers. I know we did some training for them. And in Canada for those, we had like 36,000 Canadians fight as American soldiers for it. Just a major impact. It was a godsend. It was a godsend for me for that purpose, which is what has been your purpose of helping veterans, reintegrate and have a life, living the dream or whatever they call it. They deserve that, just to have that opportunity. I remember when I was 2010, was talking about with the Veterans House Chairman, Bob Fillers at the time, and he had proposed to Congress and proved it financially. So vets got 100% if they served honorably. 100%. So whatever, 100%. Whether you were injured or not, you served your country. It was 10 times cheaper than the process they have now, figuring out it's above the leg, so we give you 30%. It's part of the shoulder. That's 12%. Just give everybody 100%, and just, people will want to go to war. It's great, or won't go, or whatever. I don't know. But it was like 10 times cheaper than the process we have now. Ratings and going through here, being turned down, whatever. It's not an issue. You just go. Major impact. And I'm just so blessed and honored that I've had the opportunity to talk real and not about, he was a senator and then he was this and then was that. It's just mechanical. Doesn't say anything about this great comedian, one-arm shooter, party. Everybody fell in love with him. I mean, how many people? I wish everybody fell in love with me, but I don't have all the tickets Max had. He had all the tickets, even though people looked at him like, poor Max. Oh God, how does he do this or that? He just did it. And it's inspiring. I mean, I think about it. Whenever I talk to Max, he said, "How you doing?" I said, doing great. I'm doing great. I could be getting ready to have shoulder surgery or whatever because I'm going to have something. I can't. I don't even want to compare myself to that. I'm an outdoor dog. I want to be out there running and gunning. I don't know mentally if I could have handled that. So,
well, you've. I am so grateful that you shared your stories and your heart and your insights and about your friend.
It's my love. It's about my love. I'm sharing my love and the love.
It's something that you've taught me, and I'm grateful for everything. I can't begin to express how grateful I am to you for everything you've done for everyone and for me personally. You've also done the same thing. Many times when I didn't have anybody else to call, I could call you, and that is inspiring. But it shows me the way, and you've shown me the way, and I'm just grateful you share all this about Max because Max was just the real deal, and he was so special, and he taught me what it was like to be a person of influence and a person of inspiration, a person who mattered, and the way he carried himself and the way he did things and the way he kept it real. And I think maybe the thing I'm left with about Max is love. I said he used to end every phone call with, "Love you, man. Love you, man. Love you, bro," right? Like every time.
I got a ton of pictures over the last 45 years of him, and they're all love you, bro. And I'm gonna. I got letters.
I want to post a lot of these pictures at independentamericans.us, and we'll continue to post this. But I think that's what Max taught me was love, and to tell people you love them and show them that you love them and say you love them. So maybe if there's no way to end this conversation, we could talk for hours and hours. But I do want you to stick around for our Patreon members. I'm going to ask you a couple quick fire questions.
But I want to acknowledge one other person, Paul.
Please.
The last 2 years, Linda Bean, one of his many girlfriends that he didn't marry, that he wished he had. It was one of the things he told me in April. And she's always there every day. And she's the one that's connecting me every day with the FaceTime so I could talk to him once I left. And she's a real hero of mine, and she knows Max very well. Thank you
for that. Thank you for that. I'm glad we could recognize Linda as well. And I want to thank your better half, Melinda, because the two of you are an amazing team. And please send her my love. And just know that we appreciate you, and to all the other veterans out there who are listening this Veterans Day, we appreciate you, and live a little bit like Max did. Right, and I'll end it with that. Shad, love you, man.
Love you, bro.
Stay vigilant, man.
Thank you so much.
Vigilant. Stay vigilant. Like Max.
It's very therapeutic for me.
Me too. Me too.